3 years ago, I made a video where I pointed out the various Nightmarionne plushies hidden throughout FNAF Security Breach. At the time, it felt like this groundbreaking discovery, but even then, I knew it could mean nothing. It's very possible that someone working at Steelwool hid these plushies throughout the map just as a random Easter egg. But then, Security Breach Ruin came out, and the plushies were back. Stop, Steelwool! They put this in the game to just taunt me. Then 5 months later, Help Wanted 2 came out, and once again, they were back. Shut up! No! Please! What are you doing here? Over a year after my initial Nightmarionne video, these things were still popping up in every new FNAF game Steelwool put out. Until 2 months ago, when we got Secret of the Mimic. To my surprise, there are no Nightmarionne plushies in the game. But that's the thing. There are no Nightmarionne plushies in the game. During the part of the game where Jackie is chasing you, she noticeably gets more and more broken as time goes on. By the end of the chase, she looks like this. Her nose is gone, she has black tears streaming down her face, and if you look closely, you can see black stripes have now appeared on her arms, just like Nightmarionne. Not only that, if you happen to get jump scared by Jackie, you can literally hear Nightmarionne's jump scare sound playing in the background. This is now the 4th Steelwool FNAF project in a row where this character has shown up as a secret Easter egg. We've passed the point of this being a coincidence. So today, I'm finally gonna try and answer a question that's been bothering me for nearly 3 years now. What is the deal with Nightmarionne? Let's get started. One of the weirdest things about all of the Nightmarionne imagery showing up in the modern games is that Nightmarionne is technically not a canon character. The first time we saw Nightmarionne was in the Halloween update to FNAF 4 in 2015. And in a very rare post from Scott Cawthon, he actually straight up said that the Halloween edition of FNAF 4 was not canon, meaning that Nightmarionne, along with the Jacko animatronics, were not supposed to be canon to the story of FNAF. But then, 3 years later, Ultimate Custom Night came out, featuring the Jacko animatronics and Nightmarionne. Ultimate Custom Night is a fully canon game, so is Scott now going back on what he said and making the characters canon? This confusion ultimately put Nightmarionne in the questionably canon category. This then leads into Help Wanted, which was released 1 year after Ultimate Custom Night. In Help Wanted, Nightmarionne is back, and with a whole FNAF 4 minigame dedicated to them. Help Wanted is once again a fully canon game, so why do we see Nightmarionne here? Well, in another rare post by Scott, he talked about why this is the case. Quote, "The challenge was this. How do you take characters that are canon, along with characters that are questionably canon, and characters from every point of the timeline, and throw them all together in one game that is canon?" His solution to this was to make all of the previous FNAF games in universe.
We have recreated many of these completely fictitious scenarios, lies that you've been fed over the last several years, into a hilarious VR game.
So although Nightmarionne is questionably canon to the story of the original games, it can still show up in Help Wanted because FNAF 4 Halloween Edition is likely a real in-universe game. This essentially means that Nightmarionne is this weird non-canon original character that was put into Help Wanted just because they wanted to. All of this might make it sound like Nightmarionne has no meaning behind it whatsoever, and to that I'd say, yeah, this character might mean nothing, but that also might be the key to solving its weird appearances in the modern FNAF games. This brings us to option 1. Help Wanted is being mimicked. In Help Wanted, we're introduced to Glitchtrap, which is very likely the Mimic AI. One of the reasons we think this is because pretty much the only voice line Glitchtrap has in the game is it mimicking Tape Girl's voice.
Hello? Can you hear me?
And as we know at the end of the game, Glitchtrap successfully escapes the VR game by taking over the mind of Vanessa. Vanessa then lands the job of the security guard at the Pizzaplex, while still under the control of the Mimic virus. The reason this option is called Help Wanted is being mimicked is because the Mimic AI might be using Vanessa to mimic what it saw in Help Wanted. Let's take the Nightmarionne staff bots for example. These staff bots are obviously painted like Nightmarionne, but they also have "In Your Dreams" written on their chest. quests. This is a direct reference to the Help Wanted minigame where we have to fight off Nightmarionne in the FNAF 4 bedroom. Nightmarionne is literally in your dreams in that minigame. Further proof of this idea can actually be found in Ruin. In Ruin, Steelwool made the Nightmarionne plushie a collectible object, and also gave it a description. This was the moment they could finally give us a clue as to what all of this means. And they said, quote, "It's from that old headset game." This might make it sound like Nightmarionne has no meaning behind it whatsoever, and to that I'd once again say, yeah, it is literally just a character from the Help Wanted VR game. Need more proof? In the utility tunnels under the Pizzaplex, you can find several secret rooms that are hidden behind gates. If you end up upgrading Freddy and opening the gates, you'll find that these rooms are physical recreations of the minigames from Help Wanted. We have the Plush Baby minigame, the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, and the Build-A-Mangle minigame. These rooms could once again be the Mimic AI using Vanessa to mimic what it saw in Help Wanted, by literally building the sets and recreating the characters it saw in that game. I think that's pretty straightforward. It's just the Mimic virus using Vanessa to mimic what it saw. Well, that then brings us to option 2, which I like to call, it's probably more complicated than that. While it's true that Nightmarionne is just a character, quote, from that old headset game, that doesn't mean it's not important. It feels to me that this character is symbolism for something in the modern games. The Help Wanted is being mimicked explanation could have been the case when Security Breach first came out, since we know that the story of that game was all over the place.
I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one that got in the game.
So even though Nightmarionne could have meant nothing in Security Breach, Scott and Steelwool might have decided to make it mean something in future games. But even in Security Breach, Nightmarionne is shown to be very important. In one of the most lore-heavy rooms in the game, the Sticky Note room, you can find Nightmarionne staff bot heads all over the ground. Also, the Nightmarionne collectible can be found in a secret room in the Endo Daycare inside of a golden present. Only 7 other collectibles in the entire game can be found in golden presents. All 6 of the golden plushies and the Fredbear Singing Show poster. Also, in the server room, you can find Nightmarionne staff bots and wires that look like the puppet's arms. All of that is just in Security Breach. Since then, the Nightmarionne plushies and staff bots have returned in Ruin, Help Wanted 2, and Jackie literally turned into Nightmarionne in Secret of the Mimic. To explain what I think Nightmarionne means now, we need to go back to a theory I made 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I made a theory where I said that the story of the modern games is very similar to the Silver Eyes trilogy of books. I was so confident about this theory that I actually shared it with Scott Cawthon himself on my live stream. I'll say this, Scott. I am surprised at how much inspiration you took from this book. I haven't seen anyone talking about it. This book is Ruin. In the first book, The Silver Eyes, a group of teens explore a mall that was built on top of an old Freddy's Pizzeria. And while exploring the pizzeria, they run into William Afton. This is almost exactly what happens in Security Breach. We explore a mall that was built on top of an old Freddy's Pizzeria. And while exploring the pizzeria, we run into what looks to be William Afton. In the second book, The Twisted Ones, the mall that was built on top of an old Freddy's Pizzeria is now destroyed by a tornado. In Ruin, the mall is now destroyed by an earthquake. In the book, the mall was set to be demolished but was put on hold. In Ruin, you can see a giant wrecking ball that started to demolish the building. In the book, Charlie is trying to find her brother that's gone missing. This leads her to a cave with glowing mushrooms, a waterfall, and a room with carnival-themed mascot costumes. In Ruin, Cassie is trying to find Gregory who's gone missing. This leads her to a cave with glowing mushrooms, a waterfall, and a room with carnival-themed mascot costumes. In the book, Charlie thinks that her brother is trapped behind a door covered in concrete. In Ruin, Cassie thinks that Gregory is trapped behind a door covered in concrete. And both in the book and the game, it ends up being a trap. The book then ends with it looking like Charlie died, but then they hint that she might have survived, with one of the last lines in the book being Charlie. Ruin ends with it looking like Cassie died, but then they hint that she might have survived, with the last line of the game being
Cassie,
It is almost comical how similar these stories are. But if Security Breach is the first book and Ruin is the second book, which game is the third book? Back then, I thought it would be Help Wanted 2, but now I can tell you that it actually ended up being Secret of the Mimic. Here's why. The final book reveals that the main antagonist is actually a robot that was built by Henry to mimic his daughter Charlie after her death. But before Henry could finish the robot, he realized that what he was doing was wrong and beat up the robot in a fit of grief and rage. Does this sound familiar? In Secret of the Mimic, it's revealed that the main antagonist of the modern FNAF games is a robot that was built by Edwin to mimic his dead wife. But once he tried getting it to mimic his dead son, he realized that what he was doing was wrong and beat up the robot in a fit of grief and rage.
Stop sounding like him!
Not only that, in the books, Henry famously keeps his robots he built to mimic Charlie in closets in a bedroom, hence the name of the final book, The Fourth Closet. And in the secret ending of Secret of the Mimic literally walks out from inside of a closet in a bedroom. I honestly feel like I'm being messed with. It feels like Scott and Steelwool had a meeting where someone said, wouldn't it be funny if, and then put this in the game. My theory from 2 years ago was such a big swing because we already had an origin story for the Mimic in the Tales books, and it wasn't exactly the same as the story in the Silver Eyes trilogy. Edwin didn't make the Mimic to replace David or Fiona in the Tales books, but in the games, Scott and Steelwool deviated away from what the Tales books told us and made the story more like the Fourth Closet, with them taking multiple traits and plot points belonging to Henry in the Silver Eyes trilogy and giving them to Edwin in the games.
Not him. You're not! Stop sounding like him!
So how does this connect to Nightmarionne? Well, I think Nightmarionne is representative of the Mimic. In the Fourth Closet, we learned that the Charlie robot that he beat up was made alive by the rage and agony he poured into it. Quote, I was not Charlotte drenched in grief, I was made alive with Henry's fury. And I think a similar thing happened in the games. Edwin beat up and poured his agony into a robot that was built to mimic his dead wife. And one of the big things that was introduced in the games about Fiona was that she was a puppeteer.
I heard you were a puppeteer and I wanted to record your voice.
Oh, well, yes, I used to be.
I think this could be the tie to Nightmarionne. The Mimic is an agony-filled robot that was originally built to mimic Fiona, who was a puppeteer. This might be why Nightmarionne, an agony creature taking the form of the puppet, keeps showing up all over the modern FNAF games. While looking for more connections between Nightmarionne and the Mimic, I came across this video by Tetrabit Gaming. In the video, he goes through stuff found in the game files of Secret of the Mimic. It's important to point out that scrapped content in the game files is not canon, so take this with a grain of salt, but it turns out that just 1 month before the game was released, not only did Jackie's jump scare have the Nightmarionne sound effect playing behind it, every single jump scare in the game had the Nightmarionne jump scare behind it.
The mascots actually use the Nightmare Staff Bot jump scare sound effect from FNAF Security Breach.
Every time the Mimic jump scared you, the Nightmarionne jump scare would be there, further connecting Nightmarionne to the Mimic. Also, in the Help Wanted 2 ending where Glitchtrap wins, the Nightmarionne staff bots are the ones acting on his behalf. This is another connection to Nightmarionne and the Mimic virus. The Nightmarionne Plushies can be found hidden throughout Security Breach, watching us as we explore the Pizzaplex, just like the Mimic was established to do in Ruin, with the eyeballs watching us wherever we go. But what's most interesting to me is that the Nightmarionne staff bots can only be found in 2 places in the Pizzaplex, in and around the Sticky Note room and in the server room. Let's start with the Sticky Note room. In the Tales books, Scott makes it very clear that the Mimic liked drawing on multicolored sheets of paper, and it's because of this that I think the Mimic was being kept down here at some point. I also think the Mimic was able to leave this room and roam around the entire area, since these drawings can also be found scattered everywhere in the sewers. This is one of the places you can find Nightmarionne staff bots, and I think this area represents the physical mimic, while the Nightmarionne staff bots in the server room represent the mimic virus. These server rooms are probably one of the most overlooked parts of Security Breach. In the room, you can find a bunch of Nightmarionne staff bots, but also the black and white wires that look like the puppet's arms. There's also a smaller server room near the loading docks that also has the puppet wires. What started as a program that mimicked Edwin's dead wife, a puppeteer, is now decades later infecting everything in the Pizzaplex. I think it's interesting to point out that both rooms also have these giant tubes on the ceiling which look suspiciously similar to the tubes of molten metal found in MCM. Maybe the Pizzaplex is also being powered by molten metal just like in Secret of the Mimic. Or these are just big orange lights and it's just a coincidence. Maybe that's a theory for another day. One thing that could also be the case is that Fiona created the original design for the puppet. At the end of Secret of the Mimic, we see on Edwin's computer Access Alt Fazbear designs and Access Puppet designs. And Jackie's music box uses the same song as the puppet's music box from FNAF 2. Maybe this is why Nightmare Puppet would be connected to Fiona, because Fiona literally created the puppet. I definitely think Scott and Steelwool left it vague on purpose, but I honestly hope this isn't the case. I think I'd prefer for Henry or William to be the ones to create the puppet, but that's just my opinion. I honestly don't know how I feel about my current thoughts on Nightmarionne. It definitely feels like this character is important. I think we're way past this meaning nothing at this point. I think this is just another one of those things where we don't have enough information to make a solid conclusion on it, but maybe in the next game we will. These were just a couple of my thoughts on the plushies that continue to haunt my nightmares. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.